Welcome to Simply Stories podcast. This podcast channel is aimed for young, old, and somewhere in between. I read a variety of classics utilizing experience garnered from my years in the theatre. I'm Robin Coles, and this is Simply Stories. Diary of a Nobody by George and Weedon Grossmith. Chapter 1. My dear wife Carrie and I have just been a week in our new house, The Laurels, Brickfield Terrace, Holloway. A nice 6-roomed residence, not counting basement, with a front breakfast parlour. We have a little front garden, and there is a flight of 10 steps up to the front door, which, by the by, we keep locked with the chain up. Cummings and Gowring and our other intimate friends always come to the little side entrance, which saves the servant the trouble of going up to the front door, thereby taking her from her work. We have a nice little back garden, which runs down to the railway. We were rather afraid of the noise of the trains at first, but the landlord said we should not notice them after a bit, and took £2 off the rent. He was certainly right, and beyond the cracking of the garden wall at the bottom, we have suffered no inconvenience. After my work in the city, I like to be at home. What's the good of a home if you're never in it? Home, sweet home. That's my motto. I'm always in of an evening. Our old friend Gowring may drop in without ceremony, so may Cummings, who lives opposite. My dear wife Caroline and I are pleased to see them, if they like to drop in on us. But Carrie and I can manage to pass our evenings together without friends. There is always something to be done. A tin tack here, a Venetian blind to put straight, a fan to nail up, or part of a carpet to nail down, all of which I can do with my pipe in my mouth, while Carrie is not above putting a button on a shirt, mending a pillowcase, or practising the Sylvia Gavotte on our new cottage piano on the 3 years system. Manufactured by W. Bilkson, in small letters, from Collard and Collard, in very large letters. It is also a great comfort to us to know that our boy Willie is getting on so well in the bank at Oldham. We should like to see more of him. Now, for my diary. April the 3rd. Tradesman called for custom, and I promised Farmerson, the ironmonger, to give him a turn if I wanted any nails or tools. By the by, that reminds me, there is no key to our bedroom door, and the bell must be seen to. The parlour bell is broken, and the front door rings up in the servants' bedroom, which is ridiculous. Dear friend Gowring dropped in, but wouldn't stay, saying that there was an infernal smell of paint. On April 14th, tradesmen still calling, Carrie being out, I arranged to deal with Horwin, who seemed a civil butcher with a nice clean shop, ordered a shoulder of mutton for tomorrow to give him a trial. Carrie arranged with Borset, the butterman, and ordered £1 pound of fresh butter and £1.5 pounds of salt ditto for kitchen, and a shilling's worth of eggs. In the evening, Cummings unexpectedly dropped in to show me a Meerschaum pipe he had won in a raffle in the city, and told me to handle it carefully, as it would spoil the colouring if the hand was moist. He said he wouldn't stay, as he didn't care much for the smell of the paint, and fell over the scraper as he went out. Must get the scraper removed, or else I shall get into a scrape. I don't often make jokes. April 5. 2 shoulders of mutton arrived, Carrie having arranged with another butcher without consulting me. Gowing called and fell over the scraper coming in. Must get that scraper removed. April 6. Eggs for breakfast, simply shocking. Sent them back to Borset with my compliments, and he needn't call any more for orders. Couldn't find umbrella, and though it was pouring with rain, had to go without it. Sarah said Mr. Gowing must have took it by mistake last night, as there was a stick in the hall that didn't belong to nobody. In the evening, hearing someone talking in a loud voice to the servant in the downstairs hall, I went out to see who it was, and was surprised to find it was Borset, the butterman, who was both drunk and offensive. Borset, on seeing me, said he would be hanged if he would ever serve city clerks any more. The game wasn't possibly worth a candle. I restrained my feelings and quietly remarked that I thought it was possible for a city clerk to be a gentleman. He replied he was very glad to hear it and wanted to know whether I had ever come across one, for he hadn't. He left the house, slamming the door after him, which nearly broke the fanlight, and I heard him fall over the scraper, which made me glad I hadn't removed it. When he had gone, I thought of a splendid answer I ought to have given him. However, I will keep it for another occasion. April 7. Being Saturday, I look forward to being home early and putting a few things straight, but 2 of our principals of the office were absent through illness, and I did not get home till 7. Found Borset waiting. He had been 3 times during the day to apologize for his conduct last night. He said he was unable to take his bank holiday last Monday and took it last night instead. He begged me to accept his apology and a pound of fresh butter. He seems, after all, a decent sort of fellow, so I gave him an order for some fresh eggs with a request that on this occasion they should be fresh. I am afraid that we shall have to get some new stair carpets after all, our old ones being not quite wide enough to meet the paint on either side. Carrie suggested that we might ourselves broaden the paint. I will see if we can match the colour, dark chocolate, on Monday. April 8th, Sunday. After church, the curate came back with us. I sent Carrie in to open the front door, which we do not use except on special occasions. She could not get it open, and after all my display, I had to take the curate, whose name, by the way, I didn't catch, round the side entrance. He caught his foot in the scraper and tore the bottom of his trousers. Most annoying, as Carrie could not well offer to repair them on a Sunday. After dinner, went to sleep. Took a walk around the garden and discovered a beautiful spot for sowing mustard and cress and radishes. Went to the church again in the evening, walked back with the curate, noticed he had got on the same pair of trousers, only repaired. He wants me to take round the plate, which I think a great compliment. April the 9th commenced the morning badly. The butcher, who we decided not to arrange with, called and blackguarded me in the most uncalled for manner. He began by abusing me and saying he did not want my custom, and I simply said, "Then what are you making all this fuss about it for?" And he shouted out at the top of his voice so that all the neighbours could hear, "Pah! Go along! I could buy up things like you by the dozen." I shut the door and was giving Carrie to understand that this disgraceful scene was entirely her fault when there was a violent knocking at the door, enough to break the panels. It was the blackguard butcher again, who said he had cut his foot over the scraper and would immediately bring an action against me. Called at Farmerson's the ironmonger on my way to town and gave him the job of moving the scraper and repairing the bells, thinking it scarcely worth while to trouble the landlord with such a trifling matter. Arrived home tired and worried. Mr. Putley, a painter and decorator, who had sent in a card, said he could not match the colours on the stairs, as it contained Indian carmine. He said he spent half a day calling at warehouses to see if he could get it. He suggested we should entirely repaint the stairs. It would cost very little more. If he tried to match it, he could only make a bad job of it, and it would be more satisfactory to him and to us to have the work done properly. I consented, but felt I had been talked over, planted some mustard and cress and radishes, and went to bed at 9. April 10th. Farmerson came round to attend to the scraper himself. He seems a very civil fellow. He says he does not usually conduct such small jobs personally, but for me he would do so. I thanked him and went to town. It is disgraceful how late some of the young clerks are arriving. I told 3 of them that if Mr. Perkup, the principal, heard of it, they might be discharged. Pitt, a monkey of 17, who has only been with us 6 weeks, told me to keep my hair on. I informed him I had the honour of being in the firm 20 years, to which he insolently replied that I looked it. I gave him an indignant look and said, "I demand from you some respect, sir." He replied, "All right, go on demanding." I would not argue with him any further. You cannot argue with people like that. In the evening, Gowing called and repeated his complaint about the smell of paint. Gowing is sometimes very tedious with his remarks, and not always cautious, and Carrie once very properly reminded him that she was present. April 11th. Mustard and cress and radishes have not come up yet. Today was a day of annoyances. I missed the 8:45 to the city, though having words... April 11th. Mustard and cress and radishes have not come up yet. Today was a day of annoyances. I missed the 8:45 bus to the city, through having words with the grocer's boy, who, for the second time, had the impertinence to bring his basket to the hall door and had left marks of his dirty boots on the fresh, clean doorsteps. He said he had knocked at the side door with his knuckles for 1/4 of an hour. I knew Sarah, our servant, could not hear this, as she was upstairs doing the bedrooms, so asked the boy why he did not ring the bell. He replied that he did pull the bell, but the handle came off in his hand. I was half an hour late at the office, a thing that has never happened to me before. There has recently been much irregularity in the attendance of clerks, and Mr. Perkupp, our principal, unfortunately chose this very morning to pounce down upon us early. Someone had given him the tip to the others. The result was that I was the only one late of the lot. Buckling, one of the senior clerks, was a brick, and I was saved by his intervention. As I passed by Mr. Pitt's desk, I heard him remark to his neighbour how disgracefully late some of the head clerks arrived. This, of course, was meant for me. I treated the observation with silence, simply giving him a look, which unfortunately had the effect of making both of the clerks laugh, though afterwards it would have been more dignified if I had pretended not to have heard him at all. Cummings called in the evening, and we played dominoes. April 12th. Mustard and cress and radishes not come up yet. Left Farmerson repairing the scraper, but when I came home found 3 men working as I asked the meaning of it, and Farmerson said that in making a fresh hole he had penetrated the gas pipe. He said it was a most ridiculous place to put the gas pipe, and the man who did it evidently knew nothing about his business. I felt his excuse was no consolation for the expense I shall be put to. In the evening after tea, Gowing dropped in, and we had a smoke together in the breakfast parlour. Carrie joined us later, but did not stay long, saying the smoke was too much for her. It was also rather too much for me, for Gowing had given me what he called a green cigar, one that his friend Schumack had brought over from America. The cigar didn't look green, but I fancy I must have done so, for when I had smoked it a little more than half, I was obliged to retire on the pretext of telling Sarah to bring in the glasses. I took a walk around the garden 3 or 4 times, feeling the need of fresh air. On returning, Gowing noticed that I was not smoking and offered me another cigar, which I politely declined. Gowing began his usual sniffing, so anticipating him, I said, "You're not going to complain of the smell of paint again?" He said, "No, this time, but I'll tell you what, I distinctly smell dry rot." I don't often make jokes, but I replied, "You're talking a lot of dry rot yourself." I couldn't help roaring at this, and Carrie said her sides quite ached with laughter. I never was so immensely tickled by anything I have ever said before. I actually woke up twice during the night and laughed till the bed shook. April 13th. An extraordinary coincidence. Carrie had called in a woman to make some chintz covers for our drawing-room chairs and sofa to prevent the sun fading the green of the furniture. I saw the woman and recognized her as a woman who used to work years ago for my old aunt at Clapham. It only shows how small the world is. April 14th. Spent the whole of the afternoon in the garden, having, this morning, picked up at a bookstall for 5 pence a capital little book, in good condition, on gardening. I procured and sowed some half-hardy annuals in what I fancy will be a warm, sunny border. I thought of a joke and called out to Carrie. Carrie came out rather testy. I said, "I've just discovered we have got a lodging-house." She replied, "How do you mean?" I said, "Look at the borders." Carrie said, "Is that all you wanted me for?" I said, "Any other time you would have laughed at my little pleasantry." Carrie said, "Certainly, at any other time, but not when I'm busy in the house." The stairs looked very nice. Gowing called and said the stairs looked all right, but it made the banisters look all wrong, and suggested a coat of paint on them also, which Carrie quite agreed with. I walked around to Puckley, and fortunately he was out, so I had a good excuse to let the banisters slide, by the by. That is rather funny. April 15th, Sunday. At 3 o'clock, Cummings and Gowing called for a good long walk over Hampstead and Finchley, and brought with them a friend named Stilbrook. We walked and chatted together, except Stilbrook, who was always a few yards behind us, staring at the ground and cutting at the grass with his stick. As it was getting on for 5, we four held a consultation, and Gowing suggested that we should make for the Cow and Hedge and get some tea. Stilbrook said a brandy and soda was good enough for him, and I reminded them that all public houses were closed till 6 o'clock. Stilbrook said, "That's all right, bona fide travellers." We arrived, and as I was trying to pass, the man in charge of the gate said, "Where are you from?" I replied, "Holloway," and he immediately put up his arm and declined to let us pass. I turned back for a moment when I saw Stilbrook, closely followed by Cummings and Gowing, make for the entrance, where I watched them and thought I would have a good laugh at their expense. I heard the porter say, "Where from?" when, to my surprise, in fact disgust, Stilbrook said, "Blackheath," and the three were immediately admitted. Gowing called to me across the gate and said, "We shan't be a minute." I waited for them the best part of an hour. When they appeared, they were all in most excellent spirits, and the only one who made an effort to apologize was Mr. Stilbrook, who said to me, "It was very rough of you to be kept waiting, but we had another spin for S and B, and I walked home in silence. I couldn't speak to them. I felt very dull all the evening, but deemed it advisable not to say anything to Carrie about the matter. April 16th. After business, set to work in the garden. When it got dark, I wrote to Cummings and Gowing, who neither called for a wonder, perhaps they were ashamed of themselves, about yesterday's adventure at the Cow and Hedge, and afterwards made up my mind not to write yet. April 17th. Thought I would write a little note to Gowing and Cummings about last Sunday and warning them against Mr. Stilbrook. Afterwards, thinking the matter over, tore up the letters and determined not to write at all, but to speak quietly to them, dumbfounded at receiving a sharp letter from Cummings saying that both he and Gowing had been waiting for an explanation of my, mind you, my extraordinary conduct coming home on Sunday. At last I wrote, "I thought I was the aggrieved party, but as I freely forgive you, you, feeling yourself aggrieved, should bestow forgiveness to me. I have copied this verbatim in the diary because I think it is one of the most perfect and thoughtful sentences I have ever written. I posted the letter, but in my own heart I felt I was actually apologizing for having been insulted." April 18th. A.M. In for a cold. Spent the whole day at the office sneezing, and in the evening, the cold being intolerable, sent Sarah out for a bottle of Kinam. Fell asleep in the armchair and woke up with the shivers. Was startled by a knock at the door, and Carrie awfully flurried, Sarah still being out. So went up and opened the door and found it was only Cummings, remembering the grocer's boy had again broken the side bell. Cummings squeezed my hand and said, "I've just seen Gowing. All right. Say no more about it. There is no doubt they are both under the impression I have apologized. While playing dominoes with Cummings in the parlour, he said, "By the by, do you want any wine or spirits? My cousin Merton has just set up in the trade, and has a splendid whisky, 4 years old in bottle, at 38 shillings. It is worth your while laying down a few dozen of it." I told him my cellars, which were very small, were full up. To my horror, at that very moment, Sarah entered the room and, putting a bottle of whisky wrapped in a dirty piece of newspaper on the table in front of us, said, "Please, sir, your grocer says he ain't got no more Kinham, but you'll find this very good at 2 and 6, with 2pence returned on the bottle. And please, did you want any more sherry, as he has some at 1 and 3, as dry as a nut." Thank you for listening to Simply Stories. A new show will be posted every week from a range of literary greats. If you enjoyed the show, please tell your friends and subscribe. You can also check out our sister channel, News of the Times.